Hi, this is Tim Rohr from Rohr Music Studios, and today we're going to be talking about how to use the major scale pattern in understanding where to put our fingers for string players, for violins, violas, cellos, and basses. In music, we have our most frequently used scale, the major scale, that is the basis for a lot of what we try and measure as far as distances between pitches go. And in order to simplify this, what happened is that the major scale, this whole half pattern, were assigned pitches based on a place within the scale. And so we start with a C at the bottom and then go D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So it's just sequential this way, but where certain notes are closer together. So E and F and B and C are closer together. And that's just kind of the measuring stick that was created to measure these distances between pitches. Now, since our major scale pattern is sort of the measuring stick, we want to be able to measure not just the standard, the regular values of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, but we also want to be able to measure half steps in between that, kind of like on a ruler that we've got an inch, but we also have a half inch or a quarter inch. And so what we can do within this ruler of our major scale pattern is we have what are called accidentals, and they move us up or down our ruler. And if I wanted to, say, take the C and I wanted to move it up a half step, then what we would do is we'd call that a C sharp, and that moves that pitch up just by a half step. And that's kind of analogous to saying like an inch and a half. Or if I wanted to, I could also say that I wanted to move a D, but I wanted to make it lower by a half step. And that would be a D flat. And that's analogous to saying something like a half inch short of 2 inches, which both an inch and a half inch short of 2 inches mean basically the same thing. And it's just a different way of describing this. Now, when we've got these notes that have the same position within the ruler, we call these enharmonic equivalents. And we can do this with any of our notes. We can have our D that moves up to a D sharp, or F that moves up to an F sharp, and so forth. And we can also have any of the notes move down a half step as well, so like an E to an E flat, and so forth. Now, there is a common misconception because of the way a piano is built, that there is not such a thing as an E sharp or an F flat or a B sharp or a C flat. And while it's true that normally we don't have an F moving down and becoming an F flat, or an E moving up and becoming an F sharp, there are instances in which we would actually want a note to be an E sharp rather than just an F. Now, because of this measuring stick, this major scale pattern that starts on C, what we end up having with our whole half pattern is we have a half step between E and F and B and C, and everything that we do with our strings can kind of be put in relationship to all of these notes within this. But it's most especially important to remember that half steps go between E and F and B and C. Now, because we've got this ruler right here that actually really just, it repeats over and over again, what we can do is we can extend out our ruler. And after we've extended out our ruler, what we can do is we can actually kind of chop up this ruler to show where our fingers would go onto our different strings. And as an example of this, we're going to use a theoretical string that is an F string. So let's say that we have this F string and we're starting on an F for it. Based on our major scale pattern and our ruler, what we can do is we can figure out where we would put our fingers for these different notes. If we're doing a C major scale, then our first note would be on the F open string. Our next note after that, we would want to put a finger above the open string by a whole step, and that would give us the note of a G. And then I could put a finger above the G by a whole step, and that would give me the note of an A. And put a finger a whole step above the A, and that would give me a B. And then I could put a finger a half step above my B, and that would give me the note of a C. Now, with our F string right here, we can also put our finger in such a way so that we can get other pitches. Say a half step below where our B would be, that would give me a B flat or an A sharp. Or a half step below the A would give me an A flat, or we could also call that a G sharp. And same thing, we could also have a half step above the open string or half step below the G, and that would give me a G flat or an F sharp. Now let's say that we were going to do the key of B flat major, that we're going to do a B flat major scale. What we would do is we would have our major scale pattern, and that major scale pattern would be starting on a B flat. Which in this instance, here's our B flat right here, and if you look, we have a whole, whole, and then a half step, whole, 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 half step, and that gives us these notes right here in our major scale. And so a B flat major scale would have a B flat, a C, a D, an E flat, an F, a G, an A, and then finally a B flat. Now, as a brief diversion, I just wanted to talk about key signatures. And a lot of the traditions we have for writing music on a staff come from the fact that originally to write music out took a lot of work, and so the less writing that had to be done, the easier. Also related to the fact that that people were trying to use printing presses to put the music on the page, and whatever a printer could do to make it easier to print would be done so that they could save themselves a lot of time and produce music more easily and more quickly. And so what we get from this is the pattern of using key signatures. Now, on the very left here, we have our C major scale pattern, which has no sharps and no flats. And if we had a D major pattern, every time that we would encounter an F or a C, we would want to raise those by a half step. Now, in order to save time and energy, what we would do is we would just put this at the beginning of each line, showing that every F and every C would be sharp instead of labeling all of them. Same thing for the key of B flat major. We wouldn't want to put all of the B's in there as flats and all the E's in there as flat, because that's a lot of work. And so instead of putting every single one of them flat in front of it, they would just put one at the beginning of each line so that you would know every B is flat and every E is flat. So if I wanted to play a B flat major scale on a string instrument, what I could do is I could take this new ruler that we've created with the B flat major scale pattern, and I could kind of chop that up for the different strings. So if I were playing on an A string, to get to the next note in a B flat major scale pattern, I would just play a half step above the open strings. For violins and violas and cellos, that would mean a low first finger. And next after that, what I would have is I would have a whole step above my first finger to give me the note of a C. And for violins, violas, that is a low second finger. And for cellos, that is just a regular second finger. And then for the note of a D, I would need to go a whole step above that note of a C, which for violins and violas, that's just a regular third finger. And for cellos, that would end up being a fourth finger. And then to get to the E flat, you would have to go another half step above that. And so violins and violas would have a low fourth finger, and cellos would have the extended fourth finger, or a shift up to that E flat. And really, we could do this for any of our strings. If I wanted to do something on the D string, say for violin, then the pattern would be based on this same set of notes within this scale. So I would have, for violin, I would have this low first finger, and then a low second finger, a regular third finger, and then a fourth finger right there. Or let's say that I was doing this on the G string. I'd have my G open, I'd have just a regular first finger. I would have a low second finger for the B flat, a regular third finger, and then a fourth finger. Or for violin, if I was doing this also on the E string, I would not be able to play my E open string, but I would play a low first finger and a low second finger, a regular third, and then a low fourth, and that would give me the pattern of notes on my E string. That's all the time we've got for our video today, and we will see you in our next Music Theory Mini.